Hi, and welcome to Season 2 of the Team Deakins Podcast, a collection of informal conversations between Roger and James Deakins and a guest. We never know where the conversation will take us, so listen in and see where it goes. This episode is sponsored by HDR by Barco, where the magic of cinema reaches breathtaking heights with cutting-edge, high-dynamic range HDR laser projection. Don't miss the opportunity to immerse yourself in a spectacular world of deep shadows, dazzling highlights, and vibrant colors at select theaters near you. Buy your tickets, learn more, and experience extraordinary today. Visit hdrbybarco.com. This episode is sponsored by Aperture and its new Storm XT52, the industry's most powerful LED point source light. Brighter than a 6K HMI and powered by Aperture's revolutionary Blair light engine, the Storm XT52 is both a tunable white light and also the brightest ever adjustable color LED. Storm XT52, unrivaled output, only from Aperture. Today we're speaking with an actor who is also a writer. His written work includes Bug, Killer Joe, and August, Osage County, and his acting credits include Deepwater, Little Women, and the series Homeland. We're pleased to welcome Tracy Letts. Tracy, thank you for doing this.
Yes, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Nice to meet both of you.
We'd love to start with our first question, which is, how did you get to where you are today? You grew up in Oklahoma, right? That isn't really the film center of the world. Did you always know you wanted to do this, or did you find it later?
I was just interested. Your father was an actor, Dennis Letts, and your mother was an author, Billy Letts. Was it preordained that you would, move into writing and acting?
Kind of seems that way, doesn't it? But
yeah, doesn't it?
I'll tell you the truth. My folks were English teachers who found remarkable second careers. They both taught at a small college in a small town in southeastern Oklahoma, a town of 12,000 people. But they were very creative people, and they really put high premium on the arts and all form of creative expression. The house was always filled with books and music and movies and TV and lively discussion about all of those things. You were expected to develop some critical acumen to be able to talk about those things. So they were kind of amateur. My dad worked in community theater, and my mom was always kind of toiling away on some piece of writing in addition to their teaching careers. But then they both found remarkable second careers. My dad took early retirement from teaching in his mid-50s. I, by that time, was a young actor, and Dad started going down to Dallas, Texas, which was about 100 miles south of our house, and he would go down there and audition for movies and TV shows, and he started working. He had a remarkable second career as a character actor, playing a lot of sheriffs and judges and steamboat captains and stuff like that. And he wound up making some good films and working with some good people. He's in A Perfect World, the Clint Eastwood movie. He's in Castaway, the Zemeckis movie. I mean, he did some legitimate stuff, and it gave him great personal satisfaction. He had enjoyed being a teacher, but he loved being an actor too. So he was happy to find that second career. And then my mom, a different trajectory, but still one of those little pieces of writing got turned into a short story, which an agent encouraged her to turn into a novel, which she got published. And then it became one of Oprah Winfrey's early selections for her book club and wound up a New York Times bestseller. And so my mom retired from teaching school and became a best-selling novelist.
Wow.
So yeah, they both,
Wow.
It's not the standard for family in Durant, Oklahoma to have that kind of career trajectory, to be sure. I have a brother who's a musician, and I followed both folks into writing and acting. It seems like a natural fit. I had also done community theater there in my hometown, and not much high school theater to speak of. I I didn't go to college, to my parents' chagrin, given that they were college professors. And for them, college had really been a ticket out of poverty. And so, but
Right.
I chose not to go that way. And I moved to Dallas, Texas when I was 17 and started pursuing acting professionally, just out there with my little headshot and resume. Not enough work to sustain me, though Dallas at the time had a pretty robust film world. Las Colinas, the sound stages they'd built out there in the mid 80s, and they were making a lot of stuff in Dallas. But I naturally gravitated to Chicago when I was in my early 20s because Chicago had such a robust theater scene, great storefront theater, and it felt like a place where I could kind of break in. And they were doing the kind of work that I really enjoyed and appreciated. So I moved to Chicago, as I say, in my early 20s, and I lived in Chicago for 36 years. Other than a few lost years in Los Angeles, I lived in Chicago most of my adult life and did most of my work there. I have moved to New York just in the last couple of years. My wife works on a TV show that shoots in New York. We have young kids, and so we had to just be a one-house family. She couldn't do the commute anymore when kids got school age. So we've moved to New York just a couple of years ago.
Right.
And that's
Right.
how I got to where I am today.
But in Chicago, you joined Steppenwolf Theatre Company, right? What drew you to that theatre company?
Well, they were doing such remarkable work. You know, they had been doing good work for a long time, but then in 1983, 84, they did a production of Sam Shepard's True West with John Malkovich and Gary
Right.
Sinise. I went to New York and became quite a sensation. And they actually wound up recording that for, I think, American Playhouse. And a lot of actors of my generation saw that and said, that's the kind of thing I want to do. That's the kind of work I want to be doing. And so there was
Right.
really a huge migration of actors going to Chicago looking to break into the theater in general and into Steppenwolf more specifically because of that kind of work they were doing. And, you know, LA and New York, anybody who spent time there, there's a love-hate relationship with those places, especially for struggling artists. Chicago felt like a place
Yeah.
where you could kind of get your toe in. And
Yeah.
it turned out to be just a great place to learn craft and practice craft, and great audiences, great smart audiences, great collaborators. You know, people who go to Chicago, you know you're not going to get famous in Chicago. Brian Denny, he used to say, you won't make any money, but you'll always have work. And so the people who are there in Chicago, they're there because they care passionately about the work and not necessarily about
Right.
the money or the next job or whatever.
Right. Which is a little different in LA, probably.
Yeah.
So you started as an actor then. When did you decide to also start writing?
I had always written. I'd always been interested in writing, and I'd always done it, even as a little kid. I started with a couple of bad screenplays that I couldn't get made. And then after I moved to Chicago and started working in the theater in Chicago, I thought, well, what if I tried writing for the stage? And what if I tried writing? At the time, I was reading a lot of pulp fiction and noir fiction. I thought, what if you tried to put something like this on stage, which is how my first play, Killer Joe, came about. When I wrote Killer Joe, I mean, look, it took me a couple of years to get it up. And when we finally did, I was relieved. I never thought of myself as a playwright, but the play turned out to be really successful. And we wound up taking the play to London. Of course, in London, they didn't know me as an actor at all. They only knew me as a playwright. And that was the first time I ever felt like, oh, I guess I'm a playwright. And in fact, there were some English producers there in London who asked for my next play. And I had never even thought about next play. So
that was at the Gate Theatre in Notting Hill, right?
That's correct. Yeah. Do you know that theater?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I'm interested when I read when Killer Joe came out, the play, a lot of reviews were very negative, but one review that was kind of positive said, but there's a lot of nudity and violence in it, which actually drew more people to the next show or something. Is that right?
Oh, sure. That's absolutely right. I mean, the original reviews were so bad, I just thought, well, we're cooked. In fact, I remember the quote from the first review of any play I ever wrote. a hideous carnival of brutality and degradation that leaves you feeling numb and dirty. And
Great. They'll pack them in. They'll pack the audience in. Great.
But yeah, there was a critic named Richard Christensen who wrote for the Chicago Tribune. He was a great champion of Chicago theater, and he saw the show and he loved it. And he said it's good, strong pulp fiction. And he put us in his little picks and pans column that ran every weekend so people knew what to go see. But because he put us in this little box where people could check that out, he felt he needed to add a little disclaimer, which was warning contains nudity and violence. And so we sold out every show after that, of course.
and then somebody saw it that was attached to the Edinburgh Film Festival. Is that right? So then you ended up going to Edinburgh with it before London?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's really interesting journey.
I didn't know anything about the Edinburgh Festival. I'd never heard of it. But somebody said, no, this will go over very big at Edinburgh. So we had to do a pretty extreme cutting of it. We went to the Traverse. We didn't even know that the Traverse was a great venue to be at in Edinburgh. And our opening night at the Traverse, I remember Stephen Daldry was there, and Max Stafford Clark was there, and Dominic Drumgoole was there. And somebody turned to me and said, if a bomb hit this theater right now, it would be the end of English theater. I was like, I had no idea. I didn't know who any of these guys were. But they all sort of put their heads together in trying to figure out a way to get it to London. And eventually Dominic Drumgoole at the Bush Theatre, he was running the Bush at the time, and he kind of won the day. And Bush was still is, I think, known for new writing. And so the Bush brought us in. We had not only a very successful run at the Bush, but then Michael Codron, venerable West End producer, saw the show and said, we're trying to lure younger audiences to the West End, and I think this is the kind of thing. So he actually took us to the West End, and we ran in the West End for, 4 or 5 months.
Right. I want to know, where did the story come from? Because it's really quite out of the box.
There used to be in Chicago, there was a newspaper that carried a little local weekly, and it carried a syndicated column called News of the Weird. And one of the stories in News of the Weird, they just give the little thumbnails about weird true stories plucked from the news. One of them was about a Florida family in which the father and son decided to kill the mother for her insurance money until the father and mother realized the son was ripping them off on a drug deal. So they turned around and killed him instead. And it was just something about the ease with which family member could say, I'm going to kill this person. No, instead, it's better to kill this person inside the family. It's something about that sparked my imagination and seemed like the stuff of Greek tragedy, right?
Yeah. Or Jim Thompson.
Or
right?
Jim Thompson, right? Also from Oklahoma. And I was, like I say, I was reading a lot of Jim Thompson at the time. And so that's where Killer Joe came from.
Right. And then, so you were asked to write a play for the Gate Theatre, and you wrote Bug. So where did that come from? Well, where did this story about this woman who's sort of taken aside by the character played by Michael Shannon, and they kind of fall for each other, or somehow they comfort each other, and the whole thing descends into this spiral of paranoia. I mean,
and how contagious paranoia
contagious paranoia. It seems quite pertinent to present times, frankly, but where did that come from?
Well, while I was in London doing Killer Joe, I was in a cafe, and the news report about the bombing of the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City came over the wire while I was in the cafe, and I thought it was listening to British satire. I truly thought I was listening to something satiric on the radio, because a terrorist bombing in Oklahoma was at that time just an absolute absurdity. Of course, being from Oklahoma, it was such a kick in the stomach. And I started researching Timothy McVeigh and looking into the story. And these were the nascent days of the internet. This was the mid-'90s when you first first got on your home computer for the first time and were able to get on the internet. And really, all that was on the internet in the very early days was porn and conspiracy theory. That was about it. And it seemed to me at the time that the internet was such a tinderbox for this conspiracy theory. We've always had it, but suddenly it had a new way to burrow into our consciousness. And so that's kind of where the story for that came from. It was just a way of looking at not only the way that we can take on others' psychoses, but the ways in which we will actually compromise our own intellect and emotional life in order to get along or fall in love or make a family, right? So that was kind of the jumping off part for that play. We took it to London. We took it to the Gate Theatre in the mid-'90s, and we did all right. It wasn't a huge hit. The truth is the play needed a little more time, a little more work. It needed a few more productions to really kind of marinate. I mean, Mike Shannon at the time, well, he did Killer Joe when he was 18, and then he did Bug, I guess, when he was 20 or 21. And he was so great. I had written the role with Michael in mind. It took a while for it to kind of come back around. We eventually did it in Chicago, and then we eventually brought it to New York. But it took about 8 years to get to New York from that original production.
Okay, I just would like to jump to film. So how did it get to William Friedkin, a director of French Connection, Exorcist, and Sorcerer? And
I was performing in a play in Atlanta. I was doing a production of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf in Atlanta. At the time, the Bug was performing in New York, and Michael Shannon was in it. And I was sitting in my apartment, my hotel room in Atlanta, and my phone rang, and a fellow said, "It's William Friedkin." And I didn't believe it. I truly thought it was a joke. Again, I assumed that somebody was playing a joke on me. Billy had seen the play in New York the night before, and he just wanted to say thank you, and I really enjoyed it, and it just seemed very unique and original. Billy loved the theater. He saw a lot of theater, and so he really appreciated the play. And I said, thank you. That's great. The next day, he called at the same time, and he said, I went to see it again last night. He said, and I can't get it out of my head, and I think we should make a movie of it. When can you get to LA? I said, well, I've got to finish the run of this play. So I did, and I flew out to Los Angeles, and I met with Billy. And Billy, of course, had adapted Boys in the Band, which had started as a stage play. He had done a version of The Birthday Party, Pinter's Birthday Party. So Billy had some experience in adapting plays to film. And he said, my governing principle here is first, do no harm. I don't want you to write this adaptation with the idea that we have to open it up, quote unquote, that we have to travel it outside of the room. He said, that's my problem. I'll figure that out. If it needs to stay in the room, then it stays in the room. So I wrote the adaptation with Billy's guiding hand. I mean, I went through a couple of drafts with Billy giving some notes and some suggestions. And he wanted Mike, he fought really hard for Michael Shannon to be a part of it. Of course, movie people didn't want to use Michael because Michael was no kind of name at that time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So Billy was able, he stood his ground. I mean, Billy was accustomed to getting his way. And he did eventually get his way. And they made the movie early 2000s. And I was really, not only was I thrilled to have my association with Billy begin there, because he also made the film of Killer Joe. And we became good friends. He was a lovely, lovely guy and so generous to me and my family. I really adored him. But I was also really grateful that Michael's performance is preserved on film, because it's an astounding performance he gives in that thing.
It is. Well, both his performance and Ashley Judd. I mean, I think Ashley Judd's performance is
also
staggering, really.
She's
the
really
kind
great.
of whole transition she has to go through is really brilliant. I read somewhere that Billy Friedkin asked you what the bugs looked like. Is that true?
He did. He was a little, he was a little uncertain if the bugs were real or not. And I had to sort of say to him,
really.
Billy, I said, I'm glad that you think that, because that means the play's working. Anybody who's watching it or reading it should have that question in mind. Wait a minute, are there bugs or are...
Well, he puts in the film, he puts in one flash cut of a bug, right? Or it looks like I don't know if it's a locust or something, but yeah, which is, I kind of laugh at, because I think, well, they don't really exist, or maybe they do, you know.
Right.
What did change in the film version from the play?
Oh gosh, not a lot. I mean, there are a couple of times that that they do move out of the hotel room, though not frequently, not importantly, just to give a little variety to the visual world. But also, Billy did want to cut back on some of the drug usage. You know, in the play, they're smoking an awful lot of freebase cocaine, and Billy said to me at one point, "People are going to think this is a movie about drug addicts." I said, "Well, Billy, they're doing a lot of drugs," but I understood his complaint, so we cut back on a lot of the smoking of crack in the movie.
Did it surprise you? Was that the first time you'd actually been on a film set, or had you acted in films before then? I mean, it was a very short shoot, right? It was like a 21-day shoot. That must have been kind of an experience.
I had done a little bit of day player work, or maybe a week here or there. I'd not spent a lot of time on a film set. But, you know, in the case of both Bug and Killer Joe, I was doing plays, acting in plays at the time that those things were shot. And so I wasn't even able to be on the set. I was on the set of Bug for one day and got a chance to see Billy at work. And I was never on the set of Killer Joe. So I was not there for any of it. But I had close relationship with Billy, and he would call me frequently at the end of the day and tell me how things were going, or call me if he had a question. Probably better. I mean, you guys know nobody wants the writer on the set.
It can sometimes be problematic, but we had Cormac McCarthy came to set a couple of times on No Country for Old Men. That was great, because we were all kind of bowing down, you know, his God.
Did he change anything? Did he make any?
No, he had nothing to do with the film. He was just showing his kid the way it was. We were, you know, what madness filmmaking was, you know, really. It's kind of nice.
Were there a lot of changes that were made in Killer Joe? Because that does go outside.
Yeah, I made some more changes in the script to that. I mean, whereas Bug relied so much on the closeness and the claustrophobia and the paranoia, Killer Joe, it seemed like they had a bit more range of movement in the piece. And so we wrote a bit more of that into it. I do know that Billy was a stickler about the lines, you know. There was a day I was told about by one of the other actors where Matthew McConaughey was getting a little fast and loose with the lines, and Billy, of course, who was never shy about confrontation, said, "Matthew, you've got a Pulitzer Prize? You think you know better than the Pulitzer Prize winner about how this should go? Maybe you should stick to the lines."
I read Matthew McConaughey when he first read the script. He threw it in the trash. Did you?
Yeah, it's true. He told me that as well. Matthew told me that. He said, he said, "I didn't get it." He said, "I read it and it just seemed vile. It just seemed despicable." And he said, he said, "I couldn't get it out of my head." And he said, "I read it later, and he said, I realized, oh, it's funny." He kind of didn't get, you know, both pieces have some, there is some humor. There's some black humor they're both playing with. And so sometimes it's not apparent on the page. You have to put it up on its feet.
Yeah, but I thought the Coen brothers' humor was dark, but that's nothing compared with yours.
Right.
But Matthew is actually really good, though, in that character.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Was it played by Mike on stage?
Michael
did
not play Killer Joe. He played the son. He played the part that Emil Hirsch plays in the film. And as I say, Mike was only 18 at the time. So he probably would have played in the movie too, but he had gotten older, right? Mike was in his mid-30s probably by that point.
Yes.
I also read that you can't start writing unless you know the end, which seems kind of like very different than a lot of people's process. I don't know.
Well, I like to think about what I'm going to do for a long time before I sit down to do it, because I've had enough experiences where I've started to work on something and I don't know where it's going, and it just kind of meanders and it loses some of its loses some momentum and loses a lot of its focus. And so if I spend enough time thinking about it before I start the process, a couple of years usually, I will have an end in mind, and then I can sit down and write toward something, right? There's an end goal in mind that I'm writing toward. Now, that isn't to say that the end always stays the end. Sometimes I've gotten to the end and said, well, it doesn't work, and I've had to change the end. But at least I've had that in my head as I've sat down to start the process.
And OSAGE COUNTY seems very, very different. And I read that's more personal in terms of your own background.
Well,
being set in Oklahoma and Fairfax and basically where you grew up.
So after those first two plays, which were done very independently, that's when Steppenwolf Theater Company asked me to join their company, both as an actor and as a playwright. And my playwriting changed a little bit suddenly because I had a bit bigger canvas to work with, and I had new collaborators. So my first play after I joined was Man from Nebraska, which was a bigger play, more characters, more scenery, a play that travels quite a bit. Then I wrote August OSAGE COUNTY. That was my fourth play. And August was absolutely based on my experiences with my family. My grandfather, my mom's dad, committed suicide when I was 10 years old by drowning himself. And my grandmother then descended into drug addiction, which lasted for years and years, and really opioid addiction. It really put my family through hell, put my mom through hell in particular. And it seemed to me over the course of a lifetime, long after my grandparents were dead and gone, that I thought, well, this is the stuff of drama, and enough time had passed that I didn't feel like, oh, this is going to open a wound or anything. It felt like something I had a little more objectivity about, and so I could write about it. And I took a long time to write it. Normally, I wrote very fast. Again, August is something I'd been kind of thinking about for many, well, in some ways, since I was 10 years old. But so I really took my time with the writing. I would write an act of it and then put it away for 6 months before I take it back out and write another act. So I just really wanted to make sure I got it right. I was dealing with a lot of characters on stage at the same time. But I felt like the container for the story was the big American family drama, that it was 3 acts and that it was 3+ hours and that it was 13 characters and that there was a 3-story set with multiple rooms. And I felt I felt that kind of size and scope to the piece was appropriate to the story I was telling. And of course, at Steppenwolf, I have not only a remarkable group of actors to work with, but a lot of support from dramaturgs and directors and assistant directors and all sorts of people who were able to help and participate in that process, workshop the thing, really make sure we got the thing right. And yeah, it was a remarkable experience and really a game changer in terms of my career. I mean, both Killer Joe and Bug had been popular pieces, but a kind of cult popularity. I don't think they ever played a theater larger than 100 seats when they were, first starting out. But here with August Osage County was a show big enough to fill a Broadway house.
And you won a Pulitzer Prize. Did that change your life then?
I wouldn't say the Pulitzer changed my life. I mean, it's a kind of, you've won awards. You know what it's like. It's lovely to get acknowledgement, and I guess you'd rather win them than not win them. All right, it's more fun to win them than to lose them. But it's also like it's not why you do it. No, if you didn't win it, you wouldn't stop doing it. So I had a friend who won a Pulitzer a couple of years after me. He was up for a Pulitzer, and I said, "Do you want to win it?" And he said, "Well, sure." And then he won it, and I said, "How do you feel?" And he said, "I feel like if I hadn't won it, I would always wonder what it would feel like to win it." And now I don't have to wonder anymore. So,
that's out of the way.
Right.
Was it always a given that the play would be made into a film at some point?
No. I mean,
no.
Not for me, it wasn't. Look, these plays that I wrote, they're very purpose built. I mean, they're built for an audience inside a theater. They're never supposed to be movies. I never dreamt of them. They weren't. It's not like they were screenplays I envisioned, but I couldn't do them as screenplays, so I decided to do them on stage. They were all meant to be on stage. And the truth is, I don't necessarily think plays make for especially good movies. I mean, theater is language driven, right? It's dialogue heavy. And the movies don't necessarily like that, right? Movies aren't really like that. Movies, they're a visual language. So it's not a natural translation. You know, I was part of a production of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf that ran for several years, both at Steppenwolf, and then we took it to the arena stage, and then we did it on Broadway. And it was a successful production. It was very good. I mean, I'm very proud of the play. To be part of that play, you realize it has no relation to the film. The film is an entirely different thing. The film's quite brilliant in its own regard, but the film I consider it a great horror movie. It's very different than the play, which is a comic tragedy. I mean, people would constantly come see our play and tell us afterwards, say, I didn't realize it was so funny. I say, well, that's because you're used to the movie. You're used to Richard Burton feeling very put upon, and Elizabeth Taylor sort of screeching her way through it. They're great. They're great at what they do, but it's not the play. It's just a very different experience. So even when I've been part of turning Killer Joe and Bug and August Osage County into films, and I'm glad that those films have found audiences. I mean, the truth is, growing up in a small town in Oklahoma, I didn't have access to a Broadway theater. I didn't get to go see Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf on stage.
Right.
My access to Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and Shakespeare and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof and all that stuff came through the movies. That's how I got access to it. So I don't. It's not that I don't like the film versions of my pieces. I'm glad they're out there, but they weren't intended to be movies.
You see, I think the most successful to me is Bug, because not only is Friedkin sort of a brilliant director, it's just the brilliant way he builds that paranoia and claustrophobia, and he doesn't go outside the one set. You don't compromise what is the strength of the piece. You actually enhance it in the film.
Yeah.
And the performances, instead of a play, I get frustrated because I'm sitting in the back of audience and I'm thinking, well, on a movie, I can see his close-up or her close-up for that line. You know what I mean?
Right.
So on Bug, there's this wonderful balance between observing the characters in the space and then going into their faces when it's really the torment and when it really counts, you know. I felt August Osage County was trying too hard to be a film. It was trying too hard to have big stars and make it into this big sort of dramatic presentation. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. And I don't disagree. On the one hand, those people who did the movie, the actors who are in the movie, they're wonderful actors, and they really threw down for it, and they knew that they were part of something that they wanted to get right, and they worked hard on it, and they're wonderfully talented people. Again, I don't know that it ever should have been a film. I mean, the play was 3.5 hours long with intermissions. So of course we go in and we start putting together the movie, and immediately the notes start coming about how it's too long. And my response was, well, why did you want to make it? I mean, you saw it. You saw it on stage and you loved it. You loved it at 3.5 hours. Why suddenly do you want? And yet it becomes a conversation about how many screens you can be on and how many showings you can have in a given night. In other words, it becomes a commerce-based discussion. And as soon as you're in that world, it's like, well, then I throw up my hands. I mean, it's no secret that the screenplay, there's nothing in the screenplay I didn't write, but there's a lot I wrote that's not in the screenplay. And so it is a kind of adaptation of my work.
We had an experience with Miramax before, and John Wells actually.
Yes, John Wells on Company Men.
Yeah, which was an interesting story and ended. Well, everything didn't tie together at the end because that's the truth of the
The
matter.
company man lost the company.
Yeah.
Right.
And they didn't have jobs, but the studio came in
Well,
and wanted a
Harvey.
different
Yeah.
ending.
Harvey.
Right.
He said that was too down. So in fact, Harvey said no. So we shot an ending where
But that
Tommy
doesn't.
Lee's character
Yeah.
takes the company back.
Yeah, which doesn't make sense
Doesn't make any sense at all.
in the rest of the story. It's kind of like, well, the ending should fit with the story. This was a time where they did the ending after the story.
Yeah, right.
Right. Well, I mean, we could talk a lot about Harvey and his. I mean, granted, by the time he did August Osage County, it was pretty late in his tenure as a producer, and I think he had lost his mind by that point. I mean, and everybody kept reassuring me, said, "This is the guy you want to produce your film." I'm like, "Is it really?"
Yeah, really.
Is that really the guy I want?
Yeah. I've got to say, I mean, people like Harvey Weinstein, I mean, he did make some films happen that would never have happened. And then that's going to make me segue to the other film that you wrote, which was Woman in the Window, which was produced by Scott Rudin,
Right.
who was also somebody that made some wonderful pieces, happen to the screen. But I don't know. Woman in the Window, that seemed to have gone wrong. That, again, seemed to be trying too hard to be something it wasn't.
The whole thing got screwed up. God, it's such a complicated story about what happens to a movie that goes wrong or goes off. There's never any one person who is answerable for it. We had Joe Wright, the director, and we had an idea for a thing we wanted to do, and we did it, and it was not traditional. And we put it up in front of, Scott screened it he previewed it for an audience. And the test scores came back and they weren't good. And Scott just immediately started saying, well, we set out to make a traditional Fox thriller. And I was like, nobody ever said those words to me. I never would have signed up for that, right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who write that, and you could have hired them, but you didn't. You hired me, and I never would have signed up for that. But he immediately set about trying to turn it into a traditional Fox thriller, and in order to do that, he had to reshoot a third of the movie. He hired another writer to rewrite the movie. He fired his the people doing the score. He replaced the score. He all sorts of changes. He spent a terrific amount of money to try to fix the movie. Of course, all of this is happening while Fox has been sold to Disney, so there's no other producer on the project. And at the end of all that, they did another preview for audiences, and it got the exact same score it had gotten when we originally previewed the film. So,
what a surprise!
Yeah.
Oh dear, it's a shame. Is that why you've written so few scripts for films?
I think so. I
those experiences.
I consider myself a playwright first and foremost. I mean, I can't make the kind of money as a playwright that I make as a screenwriter. So I've done not much of it. And the benefits with WGA are pretty good. And things like health insurance. I mean, this stuff becomes important as an American artist. And so you have to try to do that stuff. But yeah, it's not that I've had terrible experiences. I've had a couple of very frustrating experiences where your hopes just aren't, they're not realized. And again, you can't blame any one person. Sometimes it's just a situation. And again, I sort of go back to the original intent and say, well, maybe it never should have been a movie to begin with. I mean, maybe it wasn't intended to be a movie. In the case of Woman in the Window, again, intentions were good. People were working hard. There were some great craftspeople who worked on that thing. It's a shame it didn't come out better, but what are you going to do? You throw your hands up and say, well, on to the next thing. A funny thing about that is that they had asked me to be in Woman in the Window. They had asked me to play a part in it. Scott and Joe had asked me to play a small part. And I said, I don't like to act in the things that I write. I prefer to keep the two disciplines separate. Well, why? I said, well, look, I don't think I'm as good at either job if I'm trying to do both at the same time. So I prefer to just not, I don't feel showy in that way. Orson Welles is not walking through the door anytime soon. But they convinced me. They said, it's one day, it's Roll of the Shrink. There's a nice sort of Hitchcock level of reference. If you're the shrink who's dealing with, I said, okay. Amy Adams, who was playing the lead, was into the idea. So we shot the one day. So after they screened the movie and they got the bad test scores, and Scott, sort of raked everything off the table and started remaking it, he brought in another writer. And this writer wrote additional scenes for my character. So I had been replaced as a writer, but suddenly I had to do more acting on the film. Well, of course, my original response was, I'm not about to do that. There's no reason I'm going to do that. I met with the director, I met with Joe, and Joe said, well, you should know that Scott said, this is a little awkward. I don't know that we should ask Tracy to do more stuff when I've replaced him as the writer. And Amy Adams, sticking up for me, being a mensch, said, I won't do it unless it's Tracy.
Right.
So Joe came to me and said, maybe you should do it. It was like, who cares? It's the Woman in the Window. Let's not make a big deal out of it. And I was like, okay. So I had to schlep down to the soundstage and put on the costume and go out and do another day's worth of shooting. But it was fine. I've never seen it. Yeah. I've not seen the retooled version of it. The only time I ever saw it was in an editing room before it was sent off to that first preview. And it needed work. It was in a very rough state, but it wasn't bad. It was kind of unique and had its own very sort of nerve-jangling flavor to it. So I don't know how it tested I don't know why it tested poorly in Paramus, New Jersey. Maybe it tested poorly because it didn't look like a traditional Fox thriller. I don't know, but it's kind of a shame. I think there was a good movie in there somewhere that we just never quite got to.
Yeah, you never know. Could be marketing anyway. It's done quite well on Netflix.
Yeah.
I don't know, but then everything does.
Yeah, right.
Is there a freedom when you're brought in as an actor and didn't write it and don't have to worry about the script, but just can focus on that being that character?
Oh my God. Oh, what freedom. What incredible freedom. Feel like, all I have to do is this little track. All I have to do is say these lines and get this thing. And especially the kinds of parts I play. I'm not often playing leading roles. I'm usually playing a supporting role. Sometimes I'm, ordering the drone strike. Quite often I'm brought in to supply a lot of exposition. So it's quite often I'm given a speech that I have to get through very quickly to get the information out there so everybody knows why there's a drone strike, and then I'm done. But to only be responsible for that, it feels like it's great. There's a great freedom in that.
The drone strike gag, is that because you were playing the senator in Homeland, the series Homeland?
Yeah. What happens is that, as an actor, when you do something, especially if you do something well, or you do something well in something that's popular, you just get asked to do it again and again and again.
Right.
And so Homeland was a wonderful gift. I mean, I had not acted on camera in 8 years when Homeland came to me. My work on camera had become so spotty and irregular. Most of my work was done on stage. And so we did Virginia Woolf on Broadway, and Alex Gonza, who created Homeland, came to see the show, and he asked me to play that part in Homeland. And I was a little leery about doing it because I had worked so little, but I took the job. And I thought, I'm going to sort of recommit myself to this. And I went on the set the first day, and I found Mandy Patinkin and Claire Danes separately. And I said to them, look, I've done this work sporadically over the course of my career. I'm a stage actor. I don't really know how to do this. I don't really know how to act for the camera. And would you allow me to pick your brains a little bit about this? Can I learn from you while I do this? And they were both so generous with me, gracious with me. And they took time with me to help explain why they were doing something for the camera what they were doing. They have very different approaches to film acting.
Mhm.
And so that was a real lesson for me, being able to do that show. But then what happens is that every offer after that comes through, and it's some asshole in a suit ordering a drone strike. It's like that's all they want you to do. And because I have another career, and because I'm not reliant on the money from those acting jobs, I don't have to take those jobs. So I wind up turning down all that stuff. It's just an immediate pass for me. It's like, I've done that. I've been that guy. Now, sometimes they'll come to me with a guy, an asshole in a suit, but there's something a little different or interesting about it. Henry Ford in Ford v. Ferrari, James Mangold's film. I mean, there was an asshole in a suit, but there was some depth to the character, and there was some real interest there. There were some different scenes than I'd been allowed to play in other stuff. So there's a case where I say, okay, yes, I'll do that. But for the most part, if you're a white man of a certain age and you have a deep voice and you could speak with a certain gravity, they're going to ask you to play those parts. There's no end to those parts. There's
you could end up like Morgan Freeman, always playing the president.
Right.
Or God.
I cannot tell you the number of presidents I've turned down on stage and on screen.
But Homeland must have been, that must have been great if you hadn't been doing much up to then, because it's a great series, but it's also set, I mean, it's obviously a spy thing, but it's set in the real world. It has real world kind of connections. They seem to be building episodes out of news events that happened, a few months previously or something. It seems very contemporary in that way. So
I loved it.
That was a very lucky opportunity, right?
I loved it. I loved every part of it. We shot season 3, which was my first season. We shot in North Carolina. And then season 4, we shot in Cape Town. Cape Town was doubling for Islamabad. And at one point, I remember standing in this courtyard playing a scene with Claire, and it just hit me. It's like I'm playing a spy and I'm in Cape Town, and it's just like, this is the dream, man. This is so much fun. This is just the fun stuff. And you're right. I mean, because it's not just escapist fare. I mean, those guys always had one foot in the real world, and so it just always felt like a show for grown-ups. I loved being a part of Homeland. That show went on for another 4 seasons after I left the show. I would have gladly signed up for all of them. I would have gladly done it until the very end of the series. I had such a great time. The writing was so good, so smart. I loved it.
And is it fun as an actor to do a character over that length of time that must change, I mean, slightly as time goes on? I mean, is it fun to inhabit a person for a couple of runs on TV?
Well, I didn't have to do what Claire did, right? If you're Claire and you have to play the same part for 8 years, I know that toward the end, Claire got to the point where she loved doing the show. She loved the work. But at the same time, she's like, I'm ready to play somebody else. I'm ready to play a different person. Well, I didn't have to work nearly as hard as Claire did. So I never really had that problem. I will say, though, that as an actor, I love TV. I love I just love the sort of workman-like attitude. They're like, we got to get this scene done because we got another scene to shoot. And we got a scene we got to do tomorrow. You're just at work. I love that feeling of just being at work, not being too precious about it. We're just going to get it in the can and we're going to keep moving. Now, that's also the opposite of what I love about film, right? That you're going to take your time and you're going to make sure that you get it right. And there's a kind of poetry to all of that. And for me, growing up in the theater, they both pale in comparison to the stage for me. I'm still a stage person first and foremost. But so I like all 3 of them, but for different reasons. But I love working on TV. It's funny because I don't much like watching TV. I'm not much of I don't watch a lot of TV series. We watch movies mostly here, but I like making it. It's fun to make it.
It's interesting though, like in film, it's so different. I mean, obviously I never worked with Stanley Kubrick, but when you hear of him doing 90 takes and taking 3 weeks to get one shot, the opening shot in, forget what it's called now.
Eyes Wide Shut?
No, before. Anyway, he did endless takes of Tom Cruise opening a door. 90 takes. But then, Billy Friedkin, it's like 1 or 2 takes, apparently. He's got 21 days to shoot Bug, and he's doing like 1 or 2 takes, and that's it. And everybody knows that's their moment. And I think there's such a sort of range. And I think what you're saying about television, it has to be more kind of to the point. Okay, we're just doing that. We have to get this done. We can't be indulgent.
Right.
I mean, filmmaking can be so indulgent.
Yeah.
They shoot so endless amount of footage. There's no way any editor or director in the world can know all that footage for a single scene, let alone for the whole movie. I mean, it's extraordinary sometimes. But
yeah, I know it. I will say that Bill Friedkin, he had a real attitude about that. That he felt that kind of indulgence on the part of other filmmakers, he really looked down on it. And Billy was a guy, I mean, he had gotten really hardcore about that 1 or 2 takes. I mean, camera had to fall in light had to fall in the shot in order for Billy to redo it. In fact, Caleb Deschanel, who shot Killer Joe, told me a story. He said, we did a shot of the truck pulling up to the trailer, and they did it, and they called cut, and Caleb went up to Billy and said, we have to redo that. You could see the camera crew in the side panel of the truck. And Billy said, no, it's okay. We're going to move on. And Caleb said, no, Billy, you don't understand. You look at it again. It's really bad. It's egregious. I mean, you see the full crew, all of us there in the side panel of the truck. And Billy said, Caleb, don't you think audiences are sophisticated enough to know that movies are shot on movie cameras? We're moving on.
Right. That's a really good point.
And he moved on, and Caleb said he was absolutely right. He said, by the time you cut it all together, you didn't notice. It was gone.
But I remember watching one of Marty Scorsese's early film, I wonder it was his first one, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. And there's a scene with Ellen Bernstein and the kid going across the desert somewhere. And it's like reverse 2 shots in the car. And one's like in full sunlight. You can hardly see the exterior because it's so bright and burnt out. And the other angle on the kid, I think, is twilight. It's all blue and there's a wonderful sunset. It took me, I didn't notice that till like a third time I'd watched the movie. But it's like theater. You're sitting in an audience. You're seeing something that's completely fake, a set, there's a curtain, there's everything around you, but you actually experience what the play's about and the characters,
Billy always said, when I was in an editing room with him, I said, and he would cut and he didn't care about continuity at all. And I said, well, what's the guiding principle here? And he said, my only guiding principle is performance. He said, that's all I care about is performance. If the performance is there, I'm going to use it. And if it's not there, I'm not. He said, and I don't give a shit if there's continuity or not. He said, I don't care. Because he said, if the audience is locked in with the character, that's what they care about. They don't care about any of this other stuff. They don't care about it. It's all just context for the actor to communicate the story to the audience. That's all he cared about.
Yeah. I used to work as a continuity person, and I remember each time I would get to know the actors to know which one would be thrown if you said the glass was in your left hand the last take. Because if it's going to throw them, then they're not going to be able to give the performance. So forget it.
Right.
Better to have the glass jump.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to know. But at the same time, you are trying to do the best job that you can.
You try to get it right. Obviously, you don't go with the intention of making mistakes.
Well, and the truth is that as much of it was a real ethic for Billy, that way of thinking about making a movie. But at the same time, my wife's first movie was Gone Girl. And so she worked with David Fincher on his first movie, and it was real film school for her. And David, of course, uses a lot of takes. David spends a lot of time. Now, Carrie said in working with him, she said, I was never like sitting in my trailer waiting to go to work. I was always on the set when I was there. So I was, and early on, she screwed something else. She had never been on a film set before. She didn't know. She screwed up something about an eye line that he was telling her she couldn't get it right. And he made her feel bad on set. And she went to him and she said, David, I can do this. If I just haven't done it before. If you teach me what it is, I can do it. And from that point on, he just became her mentor. I mean, he taught her everything she knows about the camera. She kind of went through film school with him. But he used to say to her, look, we've spent millions of dollars to get all of these people here for this one little window of time. Why would we not take the time to get it right? Why would we stop at one take? Why would we not keep doing it until we get it absolutely right? So I think they're both valid. In other words, I don't think there's a right or a wrong way. Everybody's got their own way. But certainly for Billy's way, it does put a lot of puts a lot of urgency in the actors. Right? They feel like, oh man, I better get this right the first time because I'm not going to get another crack at it.
Yeah, that's true. And I do think that if you do something over and over and over and over again, trying to get it right, it does put a big burden on the actor. If they're supposed to walk in and be surprised at something like the 95th time, it's a little hard to bring that forward. So I think you have to be aware of both sides of it.
But what Carrie found, what she noticed after she would watch somebody do many, many, many takes, the takes he was interested in was a little mistake or a little slip or a little bit of humanity kind of creeping through. Suddenly something kind of slipped a little bit and something is a little off. And those were the takes he was interested in, where suddenly the facade broke just a little bit and he was able to sort of capture those very human moments. And of course, his taste about that stuff is just impeccable, unquestionable.
I want to ask you, do you, as a writer, when you're an actor, can you dismiss the writer in you? When you're saying lines, do you ever question what you're saying? I mean, or you do separate those parts of your brain?
For the most part, I separate. You know, when you're working in TV, you're quite often expected to improve the line. As an actor, when you're working on TV, you're quite often expected to kind of make the line better, to sort of rewrite in the moment or improvise a little bit to make it sound a little more naturalistic. TV writers aren't so precious about that stuff, and they don't care as long as you get it to sound that way. Now, in the theater, of course, we pore over every single word and every single bit of punctuation. And as an actor, we're expected to be word perfect every night. But no, I have to say, for the most part, they're two different minds. I think sometimes I go on a set and the writers assume that I'm, because I've got a Pulitzer Prize, that I'm standing there judging the work or I'm judging them, and I'm not. The truth is, as an actor, I'm just trying to figure out how to play the role and how to get it right and how to remember it, right? As I get older, it's harder and harder to remember this stuff.
But I also think that what I've noticed on sets is sometimes you get a script and there's a real rhythm. There's a rhythm in the way certain actors speak. There's a rhythm maybe overall. And when you're on the day and you've got to make the day, people forget that rhythm and people go, oh, okay, if you say it that way, it's fine. But if you think about the whole script, it's not really, because there was this really beautiful writing in it that created a rhythm. So I think it's really important to remember that, even when you're under a lot of pressure.
Yeah, to remember the overall instead of just the moment.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
And it's very true with the Coens, because the Coens have a rhythm to their
That's
writing.
right. You make a moment better, whatever better is, and suddenly the whole rest of it, the cards fall down,
Well,
it's not true with every script.
No, as an actor, I think you know the difference between when you're making when you're making a Coen Brothers movie and when you're making some TV that you're kind of cranking out. You can tell the difference.
Right.
But also the good thing about TV is you get more time to develop a character because of the fact that it's longer.
Yeah.
So you can start with a character that's a certain way, and by the end they can be a different way, but you've had the time to change that character, which I really appreciate, especially when I see a movie that makes that switch in the character, but with no justification coming before.
Right. Yeah, no, it's true.
Just a caption saying 5 years later.
It's true. And my wife, as I say, she makes a TV series here in New York, and she's been shooting on it for a few years. And she's always she's got to concern herself with the sort of larger arc of the story, right? It is a big arc. How am I going to take this from this episode to this episode and not only entertain within that hour, but also tell a larger story about what this character's journey is. Like that's that's why it's a great gig. That's why everybody's looking for a TV series regular gig. Not only because they pay well, but because they're fun in that regard.
Yeah.
And is acting in theater is part of the thrill of it, because you actually have live bodies in front of you that are responding in the time and might be responding differently tonight than they did the night before? Do you have that kind of synergy with an audience when you're acting on stage?
Definitely. Yeah. That's a big part of it. I mean, there are any number of reasons why I prefer acting in the theater. For one thing, as an actor, you're going to tell a whole story over the course of a night. You're going to start at the beginning and you're going to end at the end, and people are going to go through an experience, and they're all live people in a room together. They've even done some studies that show that audiences, when they're at theater gatherings, that heart rates sync up. That there's their heart rates start to sync together. Everybody going through that collective experience together. They're all having the same experience. I mean, shot through their own perception, of course. Yeah. Some people may like it and some people may not. But the fact that we're all live people in a room, the vulnerability of that, as well as just the tradition of it, right? We're all going to gather together in a room, and I'm going to tell you a story. And we're going to make a little contract here. You're going to pretend that I'm a person in this thing, and you're going to sit there and be quiet and listen. Right? We have a kind of contract about that. I love that. I love the I love the ancient tradition of that.
It's interesting. We were talking to a writer, Lucy Preble, the other day, who was saying she thought that theatre was going to not only maintain but become more popular, because the kind of cinema experience, the cinema going experiences seem to be dropping away. And the movies now are, big, science fiction and superhero movies. So it's a different kind of experience. But the theatre is a very human experience. And she was suggesting that theatre might gain popularity again from that. Would you say that is true, might happen?
Absolutely. Lucy's very smart, and she's very talented, and I think she's absolutely right about that. And a lot of people in the theater, we feel that. We feel the sense people want to put their phones down. They want to turn their phones off. They want to take their attention off a screen. They want to look up at a three-dimensional person. We've become so accustomed to this, right? Here we are having this conversation, and we're two-dimensional. People want to have that experience of seeing a three-dimensional person in front of them, going through things, having experiences. There's an empathy that comes with that you just can't get on a screen, no matter how compelling, dramatic, how well executed it may be. There's always going to be something about the live experience. And I think, more and more as we get addicted to our phones and the screens, it starts to feel like the live experience becomes something a little more precious, just to be able to have that sense of proximity.
And necessary, I would say,
too. I think so.
That's a wonderful point to end on, I think. Thank you very much. This has been absolutely fascinating, and I really want to see another play, film you've written.
Excellent. Well, I hope we get a chance
soon.
I hope we get a chance to work together. That would just be a delight. And if you ever see me out and about, please come up and say hi. Would love to meet you face to face.
Yeah. True.
All right.
All right.
Well, thank you so much for this.
Thank you all.
It's been great.
Been my pleasure.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers, then. Bye.
If you'd like to sponsor the Team Deakins podcast, let us know at pod@teamdeakins.com. Thanks for listening. If you want more information and further discussion, check out the forums at www.rogerdeakins.com. Becoming a member is free, and you can ask follow-up questions there. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more new questions and topics. Also, check us out on Instagram at team.deakins. See you next time.